law. We have at present 15 senior designated advocates as our members. I thank the dignitaries on behalf of the association. Large number of our members are present. I thank them for their gesture. We are thankful to the honorable speakers who at a short notice agreed to share their knowledge on the subject of international competition law. We thank all the guests. Thank you once again.
Mr. Ashok Chawla, of course, needs no introduction here. So let me request Sir to please preside over the presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dua, President of the Competition Law Bar Association, Commissioner Peckman from Canada, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. We have 30 minutes at our disposal for a subject which can go on and on, mergers in high-tech industries. And we have, as you were told, we have two eminent speakers who come with a background both in public service and in private practice. So they come with the right kind of credentials and mix. So the way we structure this is I'll take a couple of minutes only and thereafter maybe 8 to 10 minutes each for the two speakers, and that will give us maybe a few minutes for interactions from the floor, because while merger in high-tech industry is certainly important, but at this time of the day you would perhaps be more interested in merging with Mr. Johnny Walker or some such other distinguished luminary. So let's not stand between you and Mr. Walker. Mergers in high-tech industries, and these are some points which I'm sure you'll respond to. One, the fact that there is such acute pressure and demand on firms to innovate. So where does innovation come from? Basically technology, basically R&D. So everybody is in that race, and naturally the concomitant solution is that larger technology firms pick on smaller technology firms which are still to fully blossom, and that's the way the inorganic growth takes place. So it's been proceeding at a rapid exponential pace, is going to be even faster, and therefore something which is extremely important, not just for practitioners but also for competition authorities around the world. Point number two, does this area or does this business lend itself to the traditional merger review paradigm, or does this require a framework which is entirely different? Does the traditional concept of turnover, market share, etc. work, or are those static concepts which don't really hold much good if one is looking at mergers in frontier technology areas? And this is something which has been discussed, debated in various forums, and the jury is still out on whether we really need a special dispensation or something which will serve the purpose by customizing it, by some kind of tweaking. Number three, the interaction, if not the tension, between intellectual property regime and merger review is bound to get accentuated in sectors and areas where there is preponderance of high technology. And fourthly, when one is looking at remedies, should one focus on structural remedies, one-time solutions as in many of the other cases, or they don't have much meaning because, I mean, you have a structural remedy, but the world is going to change very fast. So should we really, should the enforcers and should the people who advocate the merger in high-tech industries really be looking at focusing on structural remedies, or should we have a different kind of arrangement? Is behavior for a short while good enough? Because the structure itself is probably up for grabs and up for change substantially. So I think these are some of the issues which, and others which I'm sure the panelists will highlight, are issues which are on the table when one is looking at mergers in high-tech industries. So with that, with these opening remarks, let me pass it on to Rachel Brandenberger, who will go first. And you have the floor for about 8 minutes, 10 minutes or so. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think you need to do something. Yeah? Bring it closer.
Thank you so much for this invitation, Chairman Chawla, honorable officers of the Competition Law Bar Association, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor to be here this evening. As Chairman Chawla's opening remarks have indicated, mergers in the high-tech industries raise some very important and topical questions. And I'm going to take up a few minutes to try to explain how I see the role of competition law in assessing mergers and indeed in all antitrust assessment in relation to the high-tech sectors. In many respects, I think the analysis is as for other mergers, but I think there are also some important differences that high-tech sectors bring about, because, as Chairman Chawla has already indicated, the changes that can happen in the high-tech sector can happen so quickly and so extensively. I mean, think about when the iPhone was first introduced about 7 years ago. At that stage, we all used our mobile phones simply to make phone calls. Think about the many different functions that you use your smartphones for every day these days. Think also about the number of new players that keep coming into the high-tech sectors, bringing about very significant changes, different business models, different practices. And think also about the fact that many of the services that end consumers access and use every day are free. A number of significant characteristics of the high-tech sector. So competition law is important in this sector, has a role here, both in terms of analyzing the effect of competition and also in terms of ensuring that innovation is encouraged and not harmed in any way. High-tech industries and globalization go very much hand in hand, and that brings me to the topic of international cooperation in mergers, the topic of the last 2 days' ICN workshop. And in many cases, mergers in the high-tech sector will be investigated by more than one agency around the world, and the importance of agencies working together to ensure consistent or at least not conflicting outcomes is something that we have been discussing in detail over the last 2 days at the workshop. Similarly, all mergers, but it's particularly important in the high-tech sector, merger analysis is a prospective exercise. The agencies are seeking to try to assess what the impact of the merger in the future will be. That's always hard, and it's really hard in the high-tech sector, given the extent and pace of change, things that we can't even think about or envisage today that will come onto the market in the foreseeable future. So this also brings me to the significance of market definition in the assessment of high-tech mergers. Always an important starting point for merger analysis, particularly complicated in the high-tech sector, where we have, as I say, free services, low barriers to entry often, many market entrants, concept of using multiple products for the same service, multi-honing. How do you operate and assess markets appropriately in these sectors? Similarly, what do you make of market shares and the concept of dominance in the high-tech sector, given the characteristics that I've summarized for you over briefly, but you have your own understanding of what we mean by the high-tech sector. So what market power do high market shares today confer in the future? How transient is that market power? And it's considerations like that that have led, for example, the European Commission to approve mergers involving quite high market shares in Microsoft Skype and more recently in the Facebook WhatsApp cases. Most importantly is the role of innovation, as I have said, in high-tech merger analysis, and not to stymie the future development of the industry. However, I don't want my remarks to be misunderstood. I'm not advocating a free pass for mergers in the high-tech sector or some form of immunity from antitrust. Mergers in the high-tech sector can raise competition issues in terms of network effects, in terms of lock-in, and in terms of de facto standards. There is a role for competition analysis in high-tech mergers, as in all mergers. Each case will depend on its facts. But unequally, in cases where remedies are appropriate, as Chairman Chawla has already indicated, the need to think about what the appropriate remedy is to eliminate the competition concern, but not harm innovation for the future, which ultimately is to the benefit of consumers. The need to get the balance correct in merger analysis is always important, and in the high-tech area, particularly challenging and important. And again, this was also relevant in the cases that have been considered. Going back to international cooperation, let me highlight one particular case and then I will close, and that is a case that illustrates both the need to look carefully at mergers in the high-tech sector and indeed involving IP, as you, Chairman Chawla, alluded to, the importance of international cooperation, but also the situation where, in fact, no remedy may be necessary because any concerns in relation to the industry are not specifically created by the merger. And that's an introduction to the Google's acquisition of Motorola Mobility in 2012, which was a merger that was reviewed both by the DOJ and the European Commission, who worked in such close cooperation that they made their clearance announcements on the same day within a matter of a few hours of each other. That actually, technically, is a much harder thing to manage for both agencies than you might imagine. Other agencies were also involved in that cooperation. The ACCC, the Canadian Competition Bureau, the Israeli Competition Authority, and the Korean Authority. All of those agencies had discussions throughout the investigations. The DOJ and European Commission, in very similar language, concluded that there were no merger-specific adverse effects arising from that situation. So let me close by just stressing again the very great importance of the high-tech industries to our everyday lives, to economic growth around the world, and therefore I would suggest the importance similarly both in terms of merger analysis and all antitrust analysis to think carefully and to balance the outcomes, taking account of the competition effects and the importance of innovation in the sector. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Rachel. And we can now move to Enrique Gonzalez, and you have the floor for the next 8 to 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you to the Competition Law Association, Bar Association, for the invitation to participate in this discussion today. What I would like to do in the short time that I have is to try to address the three questions that the Chairman has put to us. Essentially, what is special, if anything, about an IT